and some other systems over there. I want to step back or ask you to step back, and I know we're going to run out of time before too long, but this question, you've talked a lot about your success in the traditional financial markets. Obviously, Fairland is enormously successful there. You've talked about the deep motivations that underlay your interest in getting One Pacific Coast started and the strategies and even taking on payday lending and things like that, which are quite revolutionary. How do you reconcile those two sort of streams of thinking, and do you see them coming together? I mean, where does social finance live in the traditional capital markets that you work in? Do you see any convergence, any interest? Do clients that you engage with or want to engage with talk about mission, talk about the nature of the work? How do you hold both of these worlds?
It's funny because Drummond is asking some questions that are really on my mind. Let me say this. When you invest money we mostly invest for schools and foundations, you have to do what you tell them you're going to do. So that you can't take their money and suddenly decide that, the most important thing to happen is, to build a dam in Zimbabwe. And if that isn't what they're expecting you to do, if that isn't the basis on which they're expecting you to make decisions, you can't do it. Having said that, I actually think that there is going to be a new way of thinking about investing. And it's one that I'm thinking about a lot, and I can't say that I've got it completely clear in my mind. But I think we're going to move to a different model of economic activity. And I think that that model is going to try to include all of the results of the activity. So that, the idea, not to be too economic jargony, but to be a little bit economic jargony, I mean, the whole idea is going to be to include all of the externalities from your behavior. So that, the simplest example is if you're going to pollute a lot, you're going to have to pay to clean up your own pollution. So that in effect, I think we're going to move to a model which is more complete, that's going to include all of the ramifications, and where the concept of sustainability and continuity and not of depletion is going to be the model that people have in their heads over time. And I think that's going to be forced on us. I really do, just by the way the natural world is moving and the way that the economies of the world are developing. So in thinking about it, I think that these two things are actually going to merge. It's probably going to take longer than I expect. But I think the thing that will make it happen faster is if people think this way and it turns out to be, I hate to say this, but really profitable. Because if it turns out that thinking this way is profitable or is more successful, then I believe that it will happen very fast.
So the idea that to engage in social enterprise means you have to sacrifice return is not one you necessarily embrace.
Well, actually, I'm drawing a little bit of a distinction between what has generally been thought of as social investing and what I'm thinking about is investing with a concept of sustainability. So let me talk about it. I mean, why is there a need for so-called social investing? The reason is because there are only two possible reasons. Either the returns aren't good enough to justify the risk, or people don't really understand the actual investment that you're making. So that if you think about Muhammad Yunus in the Grameen Bank, I think that people have come to the conclusion that before he pioneered that kind of lending, that people really didn't understand it. But I think if you think about what we're doing in Oakland or what we're trying to do in One Pacific Coast Bank, I think the expectation is that the returns on a purely monetary basis will be lower than most banks want. Whereas from our point of view, so this is social investing, that's not what we see the returns as. Honestly, if we lend money to somebody who goes around and fixes up a whole bunch of apartment buildings in Oakland, and that makes that a safer community, lets families feel as if they're better off on the street and allows jobs to be created there, that's a return that to us is incredibly valuable but might not show up on the income statement. So that would be how I would think of social investing, where the returns, if you're not just looking at the bottom line to see the returns, you're trying to step back and look at the world and seeing how are the overall returns. When I think about sustainable investing, I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking about. Someone once came and proposed to me to build a mine in Romania. And it was like, they said, okay, let me just say this. It's really terrible what we're going to do, but it's very far away, and I'm not sure anyone will ever find out. Well, from a sustainable standpoint, that's not the best argument I've ever heard in my whole life. From a sustainable standpoint, you'd have to think, how are you going to, return that place at a minimum to what it was before, if that's in fact possible? And if you look at it that way, is there really a return to this money? I think that's where we're going. I hope that's where we're going, so that there's nobody sitting there saying, look, basically I can produce a very good monetary return for myself, and the cleanup is going to be shared by everybody in this room, so it's a great deal.
It's just the way it works now, in many ways. Are you seeing much market interest in bringing this kind of thinking to bear in the traditional markets?
Well, I haven't gone out to market this. I do believe that there is a form of this that is going, I honestly think this is going to be the dominant form of investing at some point.